Welcome back to the set of the Talk of Paris with our guest, former President of Senegal, Abdou Diouf, and President for 19 years and currently Secretary General of the Organization of French-Speaking Countries. Mr. President, what are you doing? What can we do in the face of Google, the ogre Google, devouring everything, digitizing all the libraries of the world, almost all only in English? What is the best reply, the best response?
There has been a European response, I believe, a highly promising response, but from our organization's standpoint, we decided to set up a digital network of French digital libraries. This was set up in 2007 in Brussels, alongside the National Library in France and the Quebec's National Library. All those libraries in among northern French-speaking countries and southern French-speaking countries. And we started working so as to maintain our various documents, our whole heritage. And we're really working in this vein, really trying to work alongside that impetus. We're not really up to Google, but we do feel the danger, and we'd like to digitalize so as to maintain and protect our French heritage.
That's also Europe's aim. Europe has set up Europana, a European digital library. Is this going in the same direction as Francophonie?
Yes, it is compatible with our organization, Francophonie. Google has taken an initiative, and then Europe reacted, as you may well know, and among European responses, well, the French-speaking northern countries, European countries, got organized, and we organized a meeting for the creation of a global and international French-speaking network, North and South, including Eastern Europe and Central Europe.
So you don't see Google as the devil that can't be overcome?
No, not at all, not at all. No, Google is a great, extraordinary company. We need to be up to Google, but we're not going to be patching stones at Google. No, far from that. But we, French-speaking organization, are decided to respond. We decided to respond. Of course, we need resources, and this requires the support of all partner organizations, and also requires a seamless political will for the parts of our member governments.
The 27 member states of the European Union have signed an agreement under which school children will have to learn two foreign languages. Nobody complies with this agreement. Are you going to contact Angela Merkel, the Irish, the British, to make it obligatory, mandatory to learn two foreign languages? How can we make those countries comply with this agreement?
I believe that this European decision, based on principles, is a great decision. Now, I'm talking from the standpoint of the Secretary General of this organization promoting the French language. We carried out studies showing that if this decision is implemented in Europe, now, as a first language, everybody will pick out English. And as a second language, 70% will pick out the French language. Now, French is really benefiting from this. And now this is done within our promotion for linguistic and cultural diversity. Now, let me give you a positive response. I'm ready to preach the good word and really make sure that Europe implements that decision, because this is really compatible with our own interest.
This will please one of our viewers. Let's listen to this webcam question. I'm sorry for the Anglicism. A question by Rachel Kumga, a researcher.
How will you guarantee the presence and competitiveness of Francophone research focusing on the major questions now affecting the world, namely the financial crisis, access to healthcare, access to renewable energy sources, and the questions related to sustainable development?
Mr. President, your reply?
Let me talk of complementarity, not competitiveness. I'm not in competition insofar as languages. Languages belong to world heritage, and we need all those languages, most especially those major languages used for international communication. Let us not forget that French is spoken in 5 continents, now with the exception of English. French is the only language used in all 5 continents. Be that as it may, and we're not just talking about international organizations, but I'm talking about schools, the media, the economy, culture, From a political standpoint, at all levels, French should be pervasive and should be used alongside other languages. And in all of those different fields, which Madame Kunga mentioned, French is present. Do you know that at the present time, within our organization, we are thinking of a major project for distance learning provided to all teachers working in the primary schools. Now, one of the Millennium Objectives is universal schooling, and there's still a long way to go insofar as universal schooling, and it was defined for 2015. And we'd like to really invest ourselves. We'd like to get committed, and four major countries
to establish houses of knowledge.
No. We first want to work on distance learning for teachers in the primary level, just to increase the number of schools or students attending schools in the primary level. And we also have those centers for the use of new technologies, centers with all the possible media in suburbs of major cities, because problems do arise in those regions. And we also have a system which is still in the pilot phase, not just the IOF, but in relationship with other Francophone operators. And we also have a Francophone program based on
yes, but there are only 40 of them.
But this is a pilot program.
It isn't a very large number, nevertheless.
Yes, Monsieur Gosset, but we still got to start out somewhere. Now, this is a pilot program, and we are going to turn to financial institutions or states to provide us with the right resources to increase this, the number of those types of programs and really encourage states to accept what we have already succeeded in doing. And within the context of sustainable development, we have an Institute for Energy and the Environment headquartered in Quebec, and also disseminates the knowledge, know-how in those different fields. And this takes part in strengthening our capacities. We also have a web network called Mediateur, which is one of the networks, one of the most popular networks insofar as sustainable development. Francophonie, the organization, is not just sitting and waiting, but as you said so well, now I would like to say that we're not trying to replace the United Nations, no, but this organization is an original, modern organization trying to play the role of custodian of the French language, and we're also trying to go beyond and try to defend values which we all share, based on justice, equity, and freedom. I usually say that Francophonie is symbolizes, embodies the Enlightenment, and grafted to that, we have mutual support, diversity, universal-based civilization, and cultural dialogues. And this latter part is the heritage handed down by Léopold Sédar Senghor and the Francophonie founding fathers.
A concrete utopia, a specialist would say. Let's listen to a question by a linguist, Claude Ager, who has called for a second generation of Francophonie. Let's listen to his question.
As I'm sure you are aware, Mr. Secretary General, about 2 weeks ago, more or less, I proposed or probably introduced to this fascinating debate around la Francophonie the concept of a second Francophonie. As opposed to the Francophonie which was imposed on the French colonies, which is subject to much criticism, this second Francophonie, very present today, is the result of a free choice, not only for those who fought for the independence of their country, who chose what France had best to offer, the French language and culture, but also for those countries who've joined the OIF in large numbers, increasing all the time. I would like to ask you modestly, what are your feelings towards this concept of a second Francophonie?
Quel est votre sentiment de cette notion de deuxième francophonie?
So, a second Francophonie for the future. Is it necessary? What do you feel?
This is the second Francophonie. I congratulated Monsieur Gage after the article he wrote in Le Monde. We're right into this second Francophonie. What did Monsieur Senghor say? After the collapse of colonization, we found this extraordinary tool, the French language. What did Khattab Yassine, the Algerian writer? French language is a war trophy. It no longer belongs to us. This is a language which we picked out deliberately. Now, thanks to all the various historical factors that enabled us to really get familiar with that language. But it's the language we're now using for international communication, and we're now advocating universal values thanks to that language. I'm talking about universal values. Why? Because Francophonie is not striving for cultural perspective when advocating its own values, because some people are saying, okay, democracy, human rights, of course, but in developed countries, things are a lot easier, but in our own countries, we need to work things out gradually. No, we're saying no to that. Despite cultural and linguistic diversity, we all need to comply with those universal values, and we don't want to put those things in perspective. Now, those universal values stemming from the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights also stem from the Declaration of Human Rights dated back to 1789.
You want to establish an idea-based community.
It's actually a spiritual community. Francophonie is a spiritual community.
What's striking is that new member states are joining your organization who aren't necessarily French-speaking.
It is very positive, and those countries are not really, or did not join us just for the sake of the language, but for the values. They know that we're championing cultural and linguistic diversity while still respecting universal values. They know that, and in that case, Francophonie is highly attractive. But we're also benefiting from that. I imposed that at the Quebec Summit, and we said, okay, good, you're joining us for the values. We all agree with that. But we would also like you to strengthen or help us strengthen our backbone.
But how? How?
In other words, you need to be francophones, and I just rolled out the idea, and all the heads of states were highly enthused of this linguistic agreement with each one of those states for making up for linguistic shortcomings. So I developed agreement projects with a principle. Okay, this is your situation insofar as the French language is concerned in the public era, in the media, in society, and the teaching infrastructures. Those are the results we'd like to reach altogether. We'd like to control the whole process at such and such a date, and we'll provide you with such and such resources. Now, this is what I call the making up, the linguistic make-up, which I'm going to integrate within that agreement, this linguistic agreement. And some states are already interested.
It's a great ambition, of course, but at a time when the world seems to be forgetting democracy and moving towards more authoritarian regimes, and at a time of chaos, is Francophonie the last bastion, the last refuge, or isn't this a bit worrying?
Well, it does worry me, but we have standards. If a Francophonie member state does not comply with the democratic principles and infringes institutions and organizes coups, for example, Mauritania.
For example?
Then our organization reacts immediately, and we carried out the extreme sanction. In other words, we fully expelled that country from our organization, and we will remain steadfast, and will be all the more steadfast since the whole international community agrees with us. We shall not accept taking power by force wherever this takes place.
A final question by internet, and which concerns Quebec.
I am a Francophone Canadian, born in the province of Ontario, and I have to admit that I've always felt somewhat marginalized by Francophone Quebecers in regards to French, which is my mother tongue. I would like to know, in regards to your project of creating a feeling of global solidarity between French speakers, do you plan to include only French-speaking Quebecers, who most often represent French Canada? Or do you plan to also take into consideration those Francophones living outside of Quebec, who are also Canadian, but are more often isolated and at greater risk of losing their language and culture?
What do you do for French-speaking Canadians who are not Quebecers?
Well, the Quebecers, as you may well know, Well, we admire them fully because of their resistance, their very strong identity.
Yes, but the question was on Canadians who are not Quebecers.
Well, we'd like to see all those francophones act just like Quebecers, but let me be very clear about it. I fully sympathize with the causes expressed by all the Canadian Francophone minorities. And in 2009, in August, I agreed and decided to convene this Acadian World Congress in New Brunswick. And we know all too well that there are powerful Francophone minorities, not just in Canada, but also in other regions. Let me tell you, as an example, last year I went to Italy, to Val d'Aoste, a province, an Italian French-speaking region, and that region is not a member of Francophonie, but I went there and preached, as you said, preached the good word and just showed them that we were present.
Finally, Mr. President, Africa was not represented at the G20 summit meeting in Washington. With Obama in the White House, will Africa be represented at the next G20 summit?
I cannot say. Africa was represented by South Africa still.
Yes, but South Africa represents a very small part of Africa.
The summit, which is going to take place in London in April, there has to be an enlargement, and some African countries south of the Sahara should get the message across on behalf of the
Do you have
Africa.
high hopes for Obama's presidency of the United States with regard to Africa?
I think so. I'm optimistic.
Very well. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for having participated in this program. I'm sorry for the English title, Talk of Paris, but thank you also. I'd like to thank all the teams of France 24, Julia Dorner, Pierre Gabas, and all the teams of France 24 who have welcomed you in this studio. See you soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Join us again next week for another edition of the Talk of Paris. See you soon.